This is a bonus episode of the Relativity Series produced by LA Theater Works. Lead funding for the Relativity Series is provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, bridging science and the arts in the modern world. We learned a lot about Rosalind Franklin and the discovery of DNA in photograph 51 by Anna Ziegler. Now let's dive a little deeper. Here's Susan Lowenberg.
I'm joined now by Brenda Maddox, the world's foremost biographer of Rosalind Franklin. Miss Maddox has written acclaimed biographies of William Butler Yeats, Nora Joyce, and D.H. Lawrence, for which she was awarded the prestigious Whitbread Biography Prize. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Times of London, and the Observer, among others, and regularly contributes to BBC Radio 4. Brenda Maddox, welcome to LA Theater Works, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Most people who know of Rosalind Franklin have a particular image of her in mind. Could you describe the stereotypical Rosalind Franklin?
Well, what they know of Rosalind Franklin comes largely from James Watson's book, The Double Helix, in which he described her as a kind of bad-tempered blue stocking who wouldn't let other people see her work. His portrait of her has been much criticized, but my answer to that is that if it hadn't been for Jim Watson, nobody would have heard of Rosalind Franklin.
As her biographer, do you agree with his assessment and his description of her?
Yes, I think she did annoy a lot of people, and she did have a fierce temper. What I don't agree with is the kind of feminist myth of her as the wronged heroine. She was a very good scientist, and she didn't like the lab she was working at, and she wanted to get out as soon as possible. So it was as much her fault as anybody else's that she wasn't there to profit from the great discovery that Maurice Wilkins, Francis Crick, and James Watson made with the result of her X-ray photographs. She was so unhappy at King's College London that she moved to a much less prestigious college within London, Birkbeck College. So her work, which she had left behind, was shown to Watson and Crick, and they went on to one of the greatest scientific discoveries of all time. But that's why she wasn't there.
Describe for us Rosalind Franklin's early life. What sort of a life did she and her family have as Jews living in England?
She was a type which is probably not too well understood in America, but a very affluent upper-class Jews who had come to England in the 18th century. They were very well established as bankers, and they tend to marry each other. It was called the cousinhood. She didn't marry anybody, but not because they were Jewish, but just because she was just so interested in her own work. But they lived in Kensington, North Kensington, in a very good part of London, and she went to St. Paul's Girls' School and then to university. She was just very good at everything she did.
Was Rosalind encouraged in her mathematical interests as a child?
Her family respected her intellect. They just let her get on with it. I think they didn't push her in any way. I mean, she had a very good early education, and she was very good at it. And there was none of this sense one thinks to think that people held girls back in the past. Her family certainly had absolutely none of that. She belonged to a family which respected women's achievement.
Rosalind went to Cambridge in 1938. Was this decision supported by her family?
Oh, yes. They certainly wanted her to get on. They were kind of a family that wanted the best of everything for their children, and you couldn't get better than Cambridge.
How would you characterize her years at Cambridge?
I think she was very, very happy there. She did love science, and she loved getting on with her work, and she, as far as I know, had no social problems. She learned a lot, and she profited from it completely.
Rosalind relocated to France several years after graduating from Cambridge. What brought her there, and what sort of work was she doing?
She had a good job in a lab, and she hadn't been able to find a job in London that would actually allow her to do the kind of research she wanted to do. So she was working very happily in Paris, but her letters make clear all the time that she wanted to come back to London. She was looking for jobs at the Royal Institution, at King's College, at Birkbeck College, and when she finally got an appointment at King's College, she immediately came home.
Was Rosalind brought to King's to work specifically on DNA?
No, J.T. Randall, who brought her down, he said he wanted her to work on certain acids in which we are interested. He knew from her French work that she was very good at X-ray photography. And it just so happened before she got to King's, he got some wonderful samples called Signer DNA, which was very, very good for photographic purposes. So when she got there, he gave her the material, and it was just perfect for the work she knew very well how to do.
Did Rosalind have any sense that her work, after she left King's, was being co-opted by Watson, Crick, and Wilkins?
No, she didn't. To her, she was working on something different called RNA, and those were exciting initials as DNA. And she died of cancer, unfortunately, sadly, in 1958, before Watson, Crick, and Wilkins got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the double helix of DNA. But she didn't have a sense that, oh, they've stolen it from me. She was more interested in what she was doing next.
So how close was Rosalind to uncovering the true model of DNA on her own, even though she may not have realized at the time the importance of what she was doing?
Probably, it has been said, a couple of months away. If she'd persisted at it, she would have seen it. But also in science, you have to share knowledge with other people, and she was too much of a loner. I think that really held her back. But if she had, if science is full of ifs, if she had stayed at King's and she had realized, and she had talked to Watson, who's coming down from Cambridge, interested himself in trying to figure out how DNA replicated, she might have got it, but it's just what might have been.
So in a way, her own limitations, her inability to truly communicate with people, is what negatively impacted, the best outcome of this research and all this work she'd done. I mean, in a way, she sort of threw it away without knowing it.
She did, without knowing it. But remember, this was 1951. And it wasn't like the North Pole or something, people striving out for a known target. They didn't know quite what they were looking for, and they were just fumbling around. And she was a wonderful scientist at a time when there weren't many women scientists. But she wasn't striving for a goal, and certainly not for a Nobel Prize.
How was Rosalind memorialized at the time? Was there any controversy over her legacy in the immediate aftermath of her death?
Nobody had thought of her until James Watson's book. And Watson's book came out in 1968. And, of course, by then, feminism had got underway, and people started to say, where are the women scientists? Why is their work not being recognized? But she just died almost too early before people began to expect that women even did science.
Did any of her former collaborators come forward to set the record straight, as it were, about her true contributions?
Well, I think after Watson's book came out in 1968, she died in 1958. And as her family said, I'm glad she never lived to see the book, because she probably wouldn't have written so frankly. And yes, Dawn Casper has, and even Maurice Wilkins, various people have acknowledged, and of course the feminists have taken up the cause and really tried to restore her or reinvigorate her reputation.
What sort of a model or influence does she serve for young women scientists working in the field today?
She's an inspiration for young women, that women can go into science, and they can even now, they're learning, go into physics. I think today's young women can't imagine what it was like all those decades ago when, women weren't taken seriously, luckily, because if they are interested in science, they will do it, and without thinking, I can't do this because I'm a woman.
Brenda Maddox, thank you for speaking with us today. This was very interesting.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Brenda Maddox, the author of Rosalind Franklin, The Dark Lady of DNA.
And just so you know, we've got another piece on Rosalind Franklin out right now, as well as a lot of other science-themed plays. So please subscribe to the Relativity Series so you don't miss a thing. Lead funding for the Relativity Series is provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation, bridging science and the arts in the modern world.